Hi, I'm Sonia Jante.
I'm Jonathan Ward.
And hi, I'm Kimberly Lane, and together we're Unlocking Leadership. We're three experienced executive coaches with very different disciplines. In every episode, we take a question from a real client and provide key insights to address their challenges from our three different perspectives. It's a holistic approach to understanding challenges and opportunities. Let's get to it. Today's question is from Pat in Little Rock, Arkansas. He says, I recently heard a colleague providing feedback to a team member, and he led into it with someone from your generation, probably ... The colleague looked upset. What do you think about bringing up observations about different generations at work? I think this is a challenging question. I think, Jonathan, you're the first person I think we should hear from. What do you
Thank
think?
you so much. No, it is a great question. And it's interesting how much attention we're paying to generational types of issues at work now. I think I'm hearing more about that than I used to. The thing for me is, I guess, when I start thinking about calling out people from your generation does X, Y, and Z, you really run the risk of stereotyping people. And if you go back and think about it's generational position, way we were brought up, we have our attitudes and things like that. That's true to an extent, but it's also, if you think about culture or any type of behavior, that you're really looking at things on a bell curve. And a lot of times when we make generalizations about a generation or about people from a given country or things like that, we're looking at the center of that bell curve and not people who might be at either extreme there. So you really run into all kinds of dangers as soon as you start assuming that somebody is going to behave this way because they're generation Y or millennial or, heaven forbid, a boomer. So I think it's really important to basically is to kind of check out if you have an assumption about what somebody is thinking, ask the question. Don't, start off with, what do you think about this, rather than just assuming that. We all get motivated by different types of things. And, it's easy for us to assume sometimes that other people are going to get motivated by the same things that motivate me. People from your generation, people from your country, people with your background are going to be motivated by this, but that may not be the case. It's always just helpful to find out more about what's going on for that person. And, I think, again, to be empathetic and sympathetic to things that are going on, because people in different generations are going through very different things. It is true now that a lot of people are paying more for paying off college expenses than they are for their mortgage or for rent and things like that. And so that may be true for a lot of people. It may not be true. But again, it's helpful just to check those kinds of assumptions out. So that's where I would start with that. What do you think, Sonia?
I totally agree with you. And the first thought that came to mind was, oh my gosh, we get in trouble when we stereotype, because that is the 90% of the time, a stereotype is not a positive way to lead into, and people probably have heard it. So the defense mechanisms come up immediately. And so now we're not dealing with somebody that's trying to understand, we're dealing with somebody that's in a defensive posture. And that always gets, into a dangerous zone. One of the things that I find interesting is, and again, go back to some of the original thoughts that I got, like from my parents. And, there's always some topics that are particularly sensitive. And I agree with Jonathan that when they are, you need to be more curious and more open to having people share their point of view. I think of age as one of them, particularly like in the West. In the East, they tend to revere people that are older and recognize that they have their place in the society and all that. And, I was doing a 360 interview the other day with somebody, and it was a young man. I would say that he was in his 30s. And I was interviewing him about his boss, who's also in his 30s. And in some point in the interview, he said, we get along really well, even though he's the second boss I'm working for that's younger than me.
Oh, wow.
And I thought to myself, so I was curious, and I said, well, so tell me about that. And he says, well, I used to think that people had to be of my generation to understand me. Therefore, they couldn't be any wiser. They couldn't be any more informed. And he says, what I realize is I am new to the organization, and he's been here longer than I have. And he's been very good in onboarding me and giving me a lot of information that's going to be useful for me to be successful. So he was giving me, the foundation and the laydown for how I could succeed. And so I just threw it out there just to see what he would say. And I said, so I'm just curious. Would you ever think of just saying, well, that's that person's point of view versus that has to do with their age? That's a good way of looking at it. So I think it's all about reframing and repositioning the fact that we can't get away from the fact that somebody who is of a different generation has seen different things, has experienced different things. I mean, I was at a networking meeting of CFOs, and the question came up about, do we think we're in a recession or not? And one of the people in the audience asked everybody, how many of you guys remember, 1987? How many of you guys remember? And so very few hands went up. And he said, that's the experience in my company. And so he was alluding to a time frame in which a particular shared experience that seems similar to today was going on. And so I guess what I'm saying is we can reposition things in many different ways so that we don't create defensive stances by others who are there in the conversation.
Yeah. Very well said. Both of you mentioned a lot of great points. It's the first time really in the history of the work culture that we really have, almost, you could say 5 generations in the workforce, from traditionalists all the way down to Gen Z. Probably for most, it's really 3 if you include, say, Gen X to Gen Z maybe, but it could conceivably be 5 generations. And with that comes a lot of diversity, right? There was a book that I started reading. It's by Hayden Shaw. It's called, and Hayden Shaw is a popular business speaker and a generation expert. And it's called, Sticking Points. It's called Sticking Points. And he actually talks about 12 areas that we need to look at when we're looking at this multiple generational piece. And, kind of alluding to what you were talking about, Sonia, and just even looking at, for us or for, say, the traditionalists or for the, baby boomers, we've had like virtually half of our life with positive experiences, hopeful experiences, barbecues and July 4th parties, and being able to run around the neighborhood and, with minimal people being abducted, et cetera. But then you look at, say, the Gen Z who have, a lot of their life with traumatic events of, say anywhere from 9/11 to war, to the pandemic, to XYZ, right? So it all adds to our makeup and how we react to things and our expectations at work. A lot of us, we didn't grow up with the cell phone, right? Versus some of the generations that they have. So just how they interpret and work and what they need at work is totally different. And so instead of coming from an insecure place of thinking, well, because they're different and I don't understand them, I'm going to attack them, come from a point of what can I learn from this? Kind of what you both were alluding to. What can I learn and embrace? What can they mentor me for, and what can I mentor them for, right? And create a respect and a learning ability versus just assuming, whoever they are and stereotyping them from a generation perspective, right? So especially in this area of DEI, it's not just age anymore. It's religious preferences, it's sexual preferences, it's gender preferences, right? So it's really a sensitive issue. And I think just we need to reframe our language around all of those issues to seek to understand, and as opposed to being out of fear, acting out of love and wanting to understand and embrace. So those are my thoughts.
I love the thought that we have opportunity to learn from everybody, no matter what their age or their experience level is within the organization. I was thinking about some of the things that show up as generational differences are because some of us have more experience in the workplace than others, but and that's going to show up just because somebody's relatively new and out of school, and of course you don't know what the ropes are here yet, kind of thing. But I mean, it can be tremendously invigorating to listen to somebody who's got new ideas, who's not been had their hopes and dreams smashed by working in the work environment for 25 years and not being able to be rewarded, but they have these sense of possibilities that's brought back out to you again. It can be tremendously invigorating.
But but just even I think about, when I was in school, it's like, you didn't have the internet, so you went to the library and you camped out for hours and you found books, and if they were out, you had to find another book, or the bibliography was ripped out, or half the pages were up. Or, now they've got the internet, right? It's like, it's such a different perspective. They have access of information at their fingertips, and just, there's just a whole different how much effort we've had to put in, or versus anybody else, and we just can't look at it from that perspective and really value where everybody's coming from and what can we really learn or from that, or accept, or be less afraid of, or find a better way to do it, right? It's we really have to, there is so much division in the world because of differences, and we have to look at where can we unite, collaborate, and learn.
You brought up a good baseline there, Kimberly, and that has to do with, and Jonathan, basically experiences shape us. And so whether the experience is we became a parent, or we became an aunt, or so it may have a little bit to do with age, but it's like understanding the different experiences people have. And a suggestion that I might make to anybody who's facing this is you might want to start practicing at home when you do have the different generations, and start engaging them or asking them different questions. For example, I have quite a few nieces and nephews that are in their late 20s, early 30s. And my joke is they came in cable ready. So they have the ability to like learn very quickly. They can watch a video on YouTube on how to change a battery or how to do something, and it'll go a lot faster with them than it would go with me, because it's not my normal learning mechanism. So I try to throw as many things at them that I know that they can do quickly, and that I want to give them a lot of praise for doing that. And what I find is as a result of that, they become a little more interested in whatever the thing that I'm going to be doing, whether it's gardening or cooking. And so we begin to have this exchange where we're connected again. We're connected because we're providing support or aid to each other in a way that both of us can appreciate. And that's something to think about. But I think that we can't, and then the other part for those of us who've been a little sensitive is know that there are people that have been, whether conditioned or whatever, to come in and say, oh, somebody of your generation, of course, would like this or that. And then you can say, well, I think other people in other generations probably would too. Move something so that you don't get into a defensive stance immediately, because you're going to like affect the moment, and you're going to affect the possibility of that relationship. Anything else? Anybody else wants to contribute? All right. Well, thank you so much, Pat from Little Rock, Arkansas, for your question today. We hope you, our viewers and listeners, have a better understanding of how to engage when sharing thoughts about people from different generations at work. To our listeners, if you like the content we shared today, please like us, like this episode, and share and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Unlocking Leadership-AskTheCoaches.com. We look forward to reading your reviews. You can also find Unlocking Leadership Ask the Coaches on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. If you have a leadership question or would like to reach out to our coaches, please email us at unlockingleadership-askthecoaches.com. We would love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us today, and tune in next time to find the keys to unlocking your best leadership.